Sold to the billionaire Alpha. Chapter 3. Shocked. Mr. Caro shut the doors and locked them. He glared at me, said,
"The Alpha is on his way. You will be leaving soon."
"Please, Mr. Caro, I can give you all the money I have saved in the bank."
The Alpha is a billionaire. I doubt you can outbid him to buy your freedom from me. Besides, it is not about the money, really, in the Alpha's case. I'd be risking my own life and the lives of all my employees if I don't deliver you to him.
I shut my eyes, taking deep breaths. I felt lightheaded. I stumbled backwards. I heard a shriek. My eyes snapped open. "Why didn't you catch her, brother?" Sylvia squealed, and running down the stairs in her billowy powder blue gown and stilettos, her sister hot on her heels in a similar outfit.
Because, Sylvia, I can't risk the Alpha smelling me or any other male on her.
The sisters helped me up, each supporting me. They carried me into a room of the mansion I had never seen before. It was a parlour of sorts, with fine furniture surrounding, a large coffee table, shelves of books lined one wall. There was a grand piano, a huge globe atlas, and a colossal fireplace. They set me down on a couch. I feel the room was spinning. I shook my head, trying to make it stop. I was a doctor, but I was of no use to myself right now. I was pretty sure my lightheadedness was psychological or psychosomatic. "Where is Rose and the other girls?"
At the auction.
"The auction isn't here." "It's in the auction house on the grounds, yes," said Salvia. How huge was this place? How was I going to get out of here? I could not do any more running just yet. I needed to know what I was up against. "Why does the Alpha want me?"
You're his mate.
"Mate? What an old-fashioned, animalistic word." "You mean he is buying a sex slave?" The term causing me to panic. My heart raced and my eyes watered. "A slave? You're far from a slave." Salvia was seemingly horrified, then Sylvia smiling and said, "You'll have servants and a mansion finer than this. But I'll be an object, his property."
No. He had to arrange it this way because he is impatient and didn't have the time to explain things to you. When he saw you, he knew you were the one. We arrange these sorts of things for powerful werewolves, so he called us right away,"
said Mr. Caro, now drinking some red wine. "Werewolves? Not this again. These people were lunatics. You expect me to believe you are all werewolves except Boris, who I heard say he was human like me?" Mr. Caro narrowed his eyes. I should not have said that.
"See how cheeky she is?"
Came Boris's voice, Speaker the Devil. He was also in a tuxedo, though his was nowhere near as fine as Mr. Caro's.
"Lock her in a room until Alpha comes."
"No way, Boris. She'll cry. Trust us. And her eyes will be puffy, and Alpha will be so upset. We're already in deep because of this bruise," added by Salvia. I wanted to scream. I was so frustrated. This was a madhouse. Suddenly, an idea popping into my mind. "Can I watch the auction?" Mr. Caro shrugged. Sylvia and Salvia looked excited that I was showing interest in their delusions. They marched me outside. I caught a glimpse of a gorgeous lawn with a huge fountain spouting water high into the air. There were flowering plants everywhere and benches to sit on while one admired them. The beauty of the house was such a sharp contrast to the ugliness of the cellar and the whole situation. I was put between the sisters in a golf cart. Mr. Caro drove it through the grounds. I tried to learn the landscape and look for exits. They walked me into a grand, high-ceilinged hallway. There was an orchestra playing, a beautiful symphony. Many servers in tuxedos carried platters of food and trays of wine. Dozens of finely dressed men, with a few women here and there, also richly dressed, formed a crowd in front of a stage. People had travelled from all over the world for this auction. I felt sick. All of these people were in on this. Girls from the cellar were being brought up one by one to be auctioned. They had been dolled up too. I spotted Rose. She looked beautiful and afraid. She was separated from the crowd of girls near the stage when a man pointed his white-gloved finger at her. Two men who appeared to be guards carried her off through a side room. She did not struggle. I rushed after her through the same side door. The three siblings followed me, but walked leisurely, as though I would not run away. I entered a room similar to the parlour in the other building. The man who had requested Rose was now sitting on a couch, smiling slyly at her. My stomach churned. "Rose!" Rose looked at me startled. I ran to her and threw my arms around her. No one stopped me. The man who wanted Rose looked amused. I whispered in her ear, "We have to get out of here." "I can't." I looked at her in disbelief. "My family owes a huge debt to a larger pack, but the alpha of that pack is my mate. That's him." She gestured to the man with the white gloves, whose eyes never left her. "He's paid off all our debts, including the amassed interest. He also gave my family a large sum of money for me. I have to go with him. I never wanted to get married, but my family made this arrangement with him behind my back. There's nowhere for me to run back to." I shook my head, my eyes stung with tears. Then I asked loudly, so that the man in white gloves could hear me, "So this is the Alpha?" His eyes fleetingly left Rose to glance at me, raising his eyebrows.
This is not your Alpha. This is Alpha Perseus. He is the younger brother of your Alpha, Alpha Orion.
Mr. Caro said. I was confused. I saw Alpha Perseus nodded, tipping his top hat to us. He had shoulder-length blonde hair, lighter than Mr. Caro's, a thick, well-groomed beard, chiseled features, and blue eyes that held a lot of mischief.
Where is Alpha Orion, Alpha Perseus?
Rose and I were being sold to brothers. I held on to her for dear life. I had only known her a few hours, but she felt like a dear sister. Trauma really does bond people.
He's on his way, almost at the gates, actually,
said Alpha Perseus, who was really scrutinizing me for the first time.
What have your people done to her?
Alpha Perseus growled, his blue eyes darkening as Mr. Caro's had earlier. He marched up to me and Rose. We clung to each other, trembling. He pulled me away from Rose, tilting my chin upwards. He towered over me. He snarled as his eyes trailed over my bruise. His eyes moved back to Rose. He released me and gathered her up in his arms tenderly. His eyes were filled with passion for her. I had never seen a man look at a woman like that before. Rose seemed transfixed by him. She was holding her breath. He leant towards her and sniffed her hair. Rose's dress had ruffles at the neck. He moved them aside, revealing the pink ring the silver collar had left around her neck. His roar was deafening. I actually screamed. Rose recoiled. She grabbed onto me and we backed away together.
Take it up with Boris. He's the one who struck Orchid and put the silver collar on Rose to stop her from shifting.
Mr. Caro said quickly. His sisters nodded fervently. Alpha Perseus started taking deep, slow breaths when he realized how frightened Rose and I were. He was trying to calm himself.
I am upset on your behalf, my lovelies. Come to me, please, Rose. Help calm me down.
He almost purred at us soothingly. Rose reluctantly released me. She seemed entranced, yet again, as she got closer to Perseus. He embraced her, cradling her head to his chest.
Orchid, my elder brother will not be happy with that bruise. You look as though you have been manhandled. I apologize in advance for this frightening behavior. He is not as gentle as me.
I gulped. Alpha Orian was even rougher than Perseus, who already acted like a wild animal.
Why hasn't she healed yet?
Asked Perseus, turning his attention back to his rose. Mr. Caro exchanged nervous glances with his sisters, and then Mr. Caro said,
Boris injected her with wolfsbane to subdue her.
Alpha Perseus began to shake violently. Rose ran from him and pushed me behind her. Perseus's blue eyes were turning black and his face was contorting strangely.
Halt, brother!
Came a deep voice. Somehow I knew who it was before I turned. I felt his presence. He had an aura that radiated power and danger. He had entered the room so silently. He was a few inches taller than the already hulking Perseus. He was dressed similarly to his brother, sans the top hat. He was a little more muscular than his brother. His hair was just past his shoulders and the same shade of blonde. He had a well-groomed, thick beard. Both brothers reminded me of Vikings. His eyes were so blue. They were the only soft thing about him. Everything else was hardened and masculine. Alpha Orian raised a large hand, palm facing forwards, indicating that his brother needed to calm down. His voice deep, soft, but commanding and dangerous.
What is the issue, little brother?
His younger brother looked afraid. Perseus seemed to be in his early 20s, whereas Alpha Orian was possibly in his late 20s.
Brother, the human called Boris injected my mate with wolfsbane and clasped a silver collar around her neck.
Perseus's eyes horrified at what Rose had went through. I glared at the brothers. She had went through it because Perseus ordered her like a Barbie doll from a store, and she had to be subdued to be kidnapped. We all did.
Summon Boris.
Alpha Orian ordered. Mr. Caro rang a little bell. A maid came. He gave her orders and she went to fetch Boris. I actually felt a little bad. They were pinning this all on Boris. Boris probably enjoyed hurting girls, but he would not have a job in which he could do that if they were not providing such a gross service. Boris entered the room. He looked terrified. He walked slowly to the center of the room where Perseus and Orion stood. He bowed to each of them, bowing more deeply to Orion. He had changed his eye patch from white to black for the affair.
Why did you inject my brother's mate with wolfsbane?
Asked Alpha Orion, his tone commanding but nonchalant.
And what was this silver collar for?
Alpha Perseus demanded right after his brother.
She's a powerful she-wolf, my lord. I needed to subdue her somehow to bring her to him. The silver collar is to stop her from shifting and breaking the cage.
But she was already injected with wolfsbane, so she could not shift even if she wanted to for the next couple of days. Why both?
Alpha Orion stated simply. It made sense to me, even though they were all crazy people. I was becoming crazy too. Boris did not have an answer.
What happened to your eye, Boris?
Your mate stabbed me in the eye, Alpha.
He glanced back at me for the first time since he had entered the room. My breath hitched in my throat. He was so handsome. My knees felt weak. Since when was I such a damsel, feeling faint twice in one day? It was a good thing I was already holding on to Rose. She provided more than enough support. Alpha Orion's face fell when he saw me, though. I was a little worried. Was I disappointing? Would he refuse to purchase me? Why did I care all of a sudden? I should be focusing on my escape plan. At this time, I heard Alpha Orian say quietly,
Why is her face bruised like that?
Mr. Caro and the sisters were quiet. They were actually trembling. This was what they had been worrying about all day.
Boris struck her.
After Alpha Perseus's word, Alpha Orian inhaled a breath sharply. He was much calmer than his brother. Maybe he liked me less than Perseus liked Rose. His face did fall when he saw me. Despite my bruise, this was the prettiest I had looked in a long time. Alpha Orian walked swiftly up to Boris and held the kidnapper's thin face in his large hands. With one fluid motion, Alpha Orian snapped Boris's neck. Boris fell down, lifeless, crumpled on the floor. His last expression was one of pure terror. I was so shocked I did not scream. The edges of my vision blurred a little. I was being sold to a cold-blooded killer. I had lived a peaceful, quiet life, trying to help others, and now I was meat for a beast. Mr. Caro and the sisters remained expressionless and silent. Alpha Perseus seemed satisfied. He went back to admiring Rose from afar. Alpha Orian turned to me as he dried his hands with a towel presented to him. His blue eyes swept over me as he neared me, and my whole world went dark.